Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B.F.A. Artist Talks tonight. We have 4 students who are graduating, and this is part of their curriculum in order for them to graduate. And I have to say, this is my first time teaching this class, and it's been so much fun, and I'm really pleased that I got to work with these students, and I'm going to miss them when they're gone. But they all are doing a great job, and I just hope you enjoy it. And we are going to hold off on questions because we have 4 people, and it's going to be about 40 minutes-ish. So if you have questions, save them for when you get up to the gallery, and they'll be happy to answer them up there, okay? All right, so our first presenter tonight is Ismelda Garza.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to express to you guys how much it meant for me to be in this program. I first want to go ahead and tell you guys that my background is not as an artist. As a matter of fact, this is my second time coming around to Western, and I'm glad that I did. I am from Santa Maria, California, and my parents are Mexican American, and I am very proud to be a part of my family. It took me time to remember my roots, the reason why I'm here today, and I am so blessed that I am able to communicate today with you guys. And the colors that you see throughout my palette, I chose different mediums with different options, items that were very, very personal to my family and to me as I grew up. To me, here you're gonna see the sketches of the roses where my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my dad, my mother, my great-grandmother, my sister, and I went ahead and pushed the roses in the background because in Pasadena, California, that's where my grandparents went and harvest roses back in the day, way before I was even born. I just remember sitting down in the kitchen, in the living room, and I want to address that my portfolio was created during COVID. So you're gonna see a variety of places and items that, you know, they're very intimate because they were done in my bedroom, they were done in my living room, they were done in the kitchen, and here is just a history of a lot of good memories. The colors that I chose for this is reds, greens, blues, phalos, and in here you can see in the table my grandfather had this saying all the time that a man always eat with chile, with salsa, meaning, you know, we harvest our fruits, our vegetables during our lifetime, and we bring it back home, and around the kitchen we go ahead and cook and have family conversations, sometimes very intimate, sometimes not. So I come from a matriarch family, and when my grandmother passed away, we all felt it in different ways. So during this time here, you can see my grandfather used to talk a lot about back in the day when he was younger, and he used to say that his dad and him and his brothers used to brand the cattle. That is what you can see there here with the letter G as my last name, Garza. That cattle was branded so the ranchers around will know that that cow belonged to this particular family clan. Why did I chose to be a painter, a female painter? I think that art chose me as I was healing from the inside out. COVID really got us into our insights. at the same time, our outside was being restricted. And I can say I took advantage of the window that I had in my room. And early in the mornings, I used to sit down, listen to music. I like different genres of music, cowboys, pop, and I allowed those different silhouettes, different times of the day, how the light hit the shadows and vice versa. At 4 o'clock in the evening, all the time, back in the day and until my grandfather's passing, as a matter of fact, we had at 4 o'clock this saying, my grandfather used to tell me, well, go ahead and get the cochinitos, go ahead and get the conchas. Those are the actual Mexican traditional breads. He and I grew up the same way, drinking 2 cups of coffee, one in the morning, one at 4 o'clock for the merienda. In here, you're gonna see the handkerchief that it is throughout my portfolio. And the reason why I chose the handkerchief is because we all used it to go ahead and remove the sweat when we were working out in the fields. And I said we because I actually did pick onions as well when I was younger, before I joined Western. And here you can see a lot of the dry brush strokes that I use to go ahead and create, delineate, and communicate this conversation between my culture, my love of life, how my family is a very happy, traditional family. And at the same time, you know, as we grow up with certain traditions, certain restrictions. You know, that's what at the end of the day makes us who we are. And in this mazapan and the red wine, or red wine in the mazapan, how I call this piece here, it was when we came back from being isolated. So you can see the difference. In here, you can see the bright reds, the greens, the blues, the phthalos, and again, the very yellows and the whites. In the handkerchief, back in the day, it used to be that the women used to, the older women or the, you know, married women, damosels before the 19th century, they used to sew all these deliciousness in the handkerchiefs, you know, different, you know, shapes that they were considered, you know, family to them, or if they were related to part of their family. Now, after the, you know, Industrial Revolution, everything got print press, and in my art, what I chose is half of a moon and a plus sign to symbolize, you know, adding, and the little V, you know, as we all, ones that we eat and ones that we work, we all go ahead and spread apart, you know, but this is representing a lot of the little conversations, the little get-togethers that we missed during COVID, because we didn't get to go ahead and communicate and share the birthdays, the parties, you know, everything that we missed. And here you can see the studio here at Western, which I was really blessed. And I like Rothko personally and Frida Kahlo. Professor Douglas was the one that initiated me, that, you know, instructed me as well. Professor Pendergrass, Michaud, and Metcalf. I remember this particular moment when I was taking my grandfather to the hospital and back and forth during COVID. And he was using the walker. And I don't know why he remembered this, but during that week, the National Geographic had turtles, you know, and so I started sketching it really quick, and finally I abstracted, and he mentioned as he was walking, he was saying, you know what, I'm going as fast as that animal that you're studying. He was referring to the turtle. When I went to play with wax at Metcalf's class, I started playing around with different shapes. Again, it took me a lot of different tries. And the last of this piece of work, you know, because I'm a female artist, because I'm Mexican American, because I had that conversation with my grandfather about his life, what it was, I'm very grateful that I had this time. And thank you for pushing me to be the best that I could be. So the reflection of finding my grandfather in my past is the reflection of finding me again, which you can see the bronze sculpture. And in my painting, you can see the light, the dark, the ethereal, and the earth. And once again, thank you so much for letting me communicate with you guys today.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all for coming. My name is Brooke Foreman, and I'm here today to give you a little bit of information about myself and the work I've created for this wonderful show that you're all about to see here. Now, a little bit about myself. I was born on November 11th, 1999, to Sarah and Kevin Foreman in Cerro Vista, Arizona. But I've spent a majority of my life in Douglas, Arizona, a little border town on the far reaches of Cochise County. We also welcomed my younger brother about 2 to 3 years later. Now, a driveling part about my life was that my parents divorced when I was around 6 years old. But at that time, you don't really understand the connotations, what that entirely means until later on in life. However, not only that, but other driveling forces and events have caused just certain moments to happen in my life, whether they were good, bad. They basically made me who I am today. But as it turns out, that also involves art. Now, in more ways than one, not only for my interest in art, but also because of my family as well. As it turns out, art making is very strong in my family. Both my grandmother and my great aunt on my father's side, as well as my uncle on my mother's side. Both my grandmother and great aunt are very prominent in painting, as my great aunt focused on indigenous subjects since she lived in Alaska. Here you can see some of the pieces that we have at my father's home. Whereas my uncle captured the human figure rather realistically with just merely color pencils. Now, I talk about and also focus on many different medias of fine arts, like painting, drawing, as well as a little bit of sculpture. This being one of my most prominent and favorable pieces. This piece is water-soluble oils on the back of primed linen canvas. The primary focus of this piece was that I got to channel my emotions, primarily that of either current frustrations or just looking back, in this case, previous losses of family members and all that. But nonetheless, I also am driven by color palettes as well. I went with more earthy color palettes here in this one because there's something so grounding about being able to understanding your emotions and making them see forth. Now, what I mean by water-soluble oils are that they're different from regular oils since they dry quicker and they can mix with water more easily. You can also mix them with an array of different medias, such as to create a glaze, which makes it a more transparent and shiny finish, or mixing it with impasto, which is used to thicken up the paint and make visible brushstrokes, which I find very aesthetically pleasing. Now, these next two are mixed media pieces. These are about a year apart, which would explain why they're a little bit different. But the premise here is by using a model and just really drive in about the beauty of the body, primarily of the female body, since that's something I'm rather familiar with. But the term, my body is a temple, is very apparent here. It's just understandable that, like, yeah, the body does things that we like and what we don't like. But in the end of it, it's yours, and you can't change that fact until the day you cease. Now, what do I mean by mixed media? Well, mixed media is essentially the combination of different art processes together. In this case, it's both painting and drawing. Here is the use of the drawing material charcoal, which is wood burnt to literally a hard piece, and as well as the use of gesso. Now, do you know that white paint that you find on canvases when you buy them from the store? That's essentially what gesso is. It helps tighten canvases and brings it down. But it's a wonderful media, especially when it comes to working with charcoal, because you can create such wonderful textures, as you can see in the far right. What you can also see there are these little bright white dashes and marks on there. That's used with white charcoal, which is a little bit different than regular charcoal, obviously, but it creates brighter whites to create more intense lights. Now, as it turns out, here at the drawing classes at Western New Mexico, we're sometimes given access to models who we can use as subject matters, whether that be for practicing exercises or just using it as an opportunity to drawing the human figure. Here you could see a previous model on the far right from this past spring semester, and on the left was of the spring semester last year, which are both are two entirely different women. Again, these were all completely done by charcoal. That way you can get it's really good because you can get an entirely different range of different values in the grayscale, which is like very intense blacks, grays, and very intense whites. When it comes to my certain style, I use this handy little tool called a mechanical eraser. It's very similar to that of a mechanical pencil, but instead it's with a long, narrow piece of eraser instead of graphite. The white charcoal is also used here. It can be used to create those very intense whites that you see as like backlight, such. Now, sculpture, as it turns out. Bronze sculpture, primarily, is my preferred approach to 3D media, especially when it comes to the involvement of starting it up with wax. And yes, I do mean the wax that you normally find on candles. But you can mold it, you can shape it, and with just the right amount of heat. Then, once you're satisfied, you create a hardened shell with multiple layers of a chemical slurry texture, as well as different textured sands. It's then taken to a special furnace that melts all the wax away inside. As you can see here, those flames falling down in the right picture, that is actually the wax falling down after being melted into a vat of water. So that way it can be reused to make more sculptural pieces. Now, despite losing that piece of wax inside that shell, the shell will actually keep all the textures of the wax, very to the nitty-gritty, which you can find after the bronzing process is completed. Then, at the end of that, there comes in a different process of what you want to do with your bronze piece, which involves sandblasting, welding, or drilling if needed, a patina of your choice, which is just the application of chemicals on the heated bronze to create different colors. There's shoe wax application to just lock everything in, and then there's the process of creating a base to present your pieces on, which can rather be wood, which I've done with my pieces, or welded onto steel. Now, why do I create what I create? Well, it's true that I bring my pieces to life through my own intuition, like the very prominent emotions that I feel or anything really that seems to plague my mind within the given moments. But to be quite honest, I don't really strive to satisfy the viewers. True, they are more than welcome to interpret whatever I bring forth, but in the end, I create my work for my own needs. It's how I fully express the things that swim around my head. That's what made me want to strive to get this degree. It was never really about making something and catering to the public, but more for my own heart and soul and bringing that forth into the world. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Katarina Lowe, and I will be talking about my art today. So, I am a very family-oriented person, and throughout my whole life, art and music have been a very big part of it. As you could see, the beautiful eye drawn right there is drawn by my father. The pottery bowl is handmade by my grandpa. And the guy with the guitar right there is my brother. So growing up around that my whole life, I've wanted to find a way to put the two together. And when I discovered graphic design, it let me do that. So these are the programs I use: Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and Procreate. 3 of these are programs on a computer, and Procreate is a program on the iPad. Now, I chose digital art because I liked that you could do so much with it, even though the program has certain limitations. For instance, I could draw something in Procreate on my iPad, and then I could take it into Photoshop or Illustrator and tweak it and just make it look a whole lot better. Now, this is what my desktop usually looks like. On the left here, you can see all the windows I usually have open, not all at once, just to diminish clutter and to try not to confuse myself too much with what I'm currently working on. Sometimes I'll have all of them open, sometimes I'll only have one open. It just depends on what I am working on at that time. Now, when I close out of all these applications, the image on the right is a screenshot of my desktop. I like to keep things pretty organized because I found in graphic design, if you don't, you can lose things you are working on pretty quickly, and then it becomes a whole nother thing and you get frustrated. So I try to prevent that. So this is one of the posters you will be seeing in the gallery tonight. I picked this color palette for a reason. As you notice, my work will start out very dark and black and gray, and it'll progress into brighter colors. And the reason I picked that palette was because during this time, when I was listening to this certain artist, a lot of family members that I was close to had passed away. And so music was a really good escape for me. And in high school, I used to be in a band, and my uncle, who gave me my first guitar, used to call me Joan Jett all the time. So that's really dear to me. And the picture on the right is all the layers that go into creating a poster like this. I don't think a lot of people realize just how much goes into creating a simple poster or graphic or logo, and how it could take sometimes days and hours just to rearrange things or to pick colors and a font. So I wanted to include that because it is a lot of work. Now, my work right here, you can see the gradient going into bright pastel colors. I chose pastels because to me, they represent happiness, calmness, and even though pastels seem like such a hard color palette to work with, I find that they're pretty easy to work with. And as my work gets brighter, so does the music I listen to. And that's why I wanted to incorporate the dark to the light, because as I've gotten older, I've realized, I don't have to be sad anymore. I could be happy and bright and myself, and that's why you see the gradient there from gray to the pastel colors. And as you can see here, this is what you will be seeing in the gallery tonight. And you could see that transition. And I hope that when you see my work, it makes you feel something, whether it be happy or sad, preferably happy. So yeah, thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Banegas, and I am a ceramic artist. I grew up in a very small town, not quite as small as Silver City, but a small town nonetheless, in Greencastle, Pennsylvania. And this town left such an impression on me as far as building a sense of community in a space that others lived in, because I would walk the streets to hopefully run into other people. And I think all of the 18 plus years that I lived there, I didn't run into a single one. No neighbors, no one walking their dogs. And so the idea of building my own community came through going to church, my home life, my family life, and my time spent with my mom and my sister. And so on these long walks that I took pretty often, I had a lot of time to think and connect to the world that I was participating in, that I was drawing inspiration from or curious about as I was growing and developing as a young person, and really had no other kind of influence other than nature to steer me in any kind of like controlled way. There was always television, there were magazines, there was, whatever you experienced at school or whatever your family lifestyle was like. That's always a prevalent influence. But my world around me was really quiet, was really passively influential, and made a lot of space for me to figure out how to be me. So going to those social spaces, I felt pretty awkward more often than not, because human connection with people that I didn't already know or wasn't already introduced to seemed to be understood, or this code that I couldn't really break into. And the method of using art, or any kind of art project that I could participate in, opened that door to learning how to connect to other people. So I started building my community through my artwork at a very young age. I remember this impressionable moment in middle school, going into one of our first art classes, and I had never met this professor before, Mr. Gamble, And unlike any other human I had ever met, he gets up on top of his desk and he sits cross-legged, very guru-like, and just turns the lights off, and all the students are starting to look around and wonder what's happening and, decide amongst ourselves how we're going to react to it. And he just claps his hands and rubs them together, takes a deep breath, and says, "Relax to create." And we're, I think we were all 8 or 9, so we're just like, okay, relax to create. Are you doing this? Are you? And I had never experienced anyone who lived their life in such a free, openly communicative way that didn't tell anyone or orchestrate like how we were supposed to interact or react or respond. We could participate or not as long as we sat quietly. And I think it was this art class and meeting this unusual human being that really, caught my attention and helped me decide that art was where, I needed to really ground myself. It made a lot of sense to me. So here is a picture of me to your right in high school. I was obsessed with my art classes. I couldn't take enough. I had even had the school design, a fashion design course, because we didn't have anything like that, because I was just like so passionate and wanted to learn about it. And my high school art teacher let me in as a freshman, which was unheard of, to join the Art 1 class. And so I had to find this inner courage of, going from middle school to high school and joining this group of older students, and how to not fit in but blend in. Like, that was really important, was to just blend in, not make waves, but figure out how everything worked. And there is really nothing like an art community to really pull you in and like let you be you. So that continued to push me in the direction of art. And when it came time for graduation, directly 1 week after graduating high school, I was in business school. And business school, I'm sure you're wondering how you've been talking about art. Business was this safe space that I had been raised to believe was a necessary step for me to then get to art. And I had spent maybe 3 semesters at this business school and, was doing well enough, but there was no culture, there was no community. And I finally got to go visit another campus, and I went to Shippensburg University and was introduced to the gentleman on your far right, Ben Culbertson, who was the professor of ceramics there. And he really helped me decide that this is where I needed to go. And so before you knew it, I was transferring all my credits and finding a place to live and ready to start my new life as a professional artist, or that was the goal. Ben was also another unique art figure, because one of the most memorable classes was walking into him with his feet up on a pot, sitting at a wheel, and like to walk in on like a Tuesday morning, first thing you see is someone in their bare feet throwing at the wheel, is a strange and burning image that is impressed on someone. And again, I met that interesting human being that really helped make me comfortable in that creative space. This picture belongs to Denise Joyelle, who is a ceramic professor at Wilson College, which was about half an hour below Shippensburg University, and she was visiting Alfred University up in New York State. And the gentleman in the middle is Val Cushing, who is a predominant icon in the ceramics world. And the cup that you see is just Ben Culbertson's style of making that I really enjoyed, and was really my first influential style of making that I got to experience. So after 3 years at Shippensburg University, life happened, and I decided I needed to take a break before I graduated. And in living my life and figuring out how to just process who I was in the world again, and how I was growing and changing, and how truth kind of evolves as you get older, I still kept making art. There's this picture of the ocean is a 20-foot-long mural that I did for a friend of mine in her house. And the other picture is of me painting another very long billboard for my sister and brother-in-law's coffee shop. There was an art gallery in Shippensburg University that I spent 10 years on and off volunteering to teach and help them with setup and tear down and any part of that environment that I could make myself a part of. It was still really important for me to do that, to maintain that connection and that community. So after those 10 years, I moved to New Mexico. And it wasn't long after that, I think that was in 2019, that the pandemic had hit. And after my first year home, I started to really miss the community and the environment of university and pushing myself to learn new things. And I started to crave new information. And this was when I decided to take a chance on WNMU and take a ceramics class once again. I don't know that I really knew what I was walking into when I decided to make this commitment, only that I knew I had to do it. And it wasn't until meeting the ceramics professor, Courtney Michaud, that I realized, like, this is the bee's knees. Like, ceramics is where it's at, and no one could convince me otherwise. And she agreed with me, and essentially gave ceramics back to me and told me to go bananas. So I did. I was really nervous getting back to the wheel, trying to jump back into a method of making that I hadn't done for 10 years. And so I started with hand building because it felt safe and because your imagination can really run wild when you're hand building, as long as you know you let it dry. And so I decided that I needed to make something gigantic. And I started with these 3 spheres. And they're about 17 inches, in size. And, the accomplishment of not making 1 or 2, but 3 of them and them not exploding was such a feat for me that I was grounded in this courage of like, well, if I can do that, I can push the boundary. I can do more. And these were, I used very simple tools: my hands, a sponge, a flat piece of metal called a rib, and I, wasn't really investigating surface or glaze so much as like, can I accomplish this task? And so after realizing I could do that, I wanted to make things that were useful. My inner business core was like, oh, well, you gotta be able to sell it, and people like to buy things that they can use. So I started to make plates. These are slab plates. They were made by hand. And I painted the design on top. So again, very simple making style, but that I could hand them over to someone, to you, and be like, let's have a meal. There was just something in that changed the direction of my style of making and the things that I wanted to create and why. So then surface became of interest, and we have access to 3 different styles of kilns here at WNMU, and I had to try them all. And the fun about a soda kiln is that you can't anticipate what's going to happen on the other side. You can throw the piece and there's one success if it hasn't fallen apart or cracked. You can bisque the piece and there's success if it hasn't exploded or cracked. You can glaze something so precisely, but if you put it in the soda kiln, the atmosphere, the cloud of chemicals that you put inside of there vary from one firing to the next that you have no idea what's going to come out on the other side, let alone that it doesn't crack or explode. So it was fun to let nature take its course on these pieces after working on the wheel. I didn't mention these are both wheel thrown pieces. And after all the time that I invested in like curating how they looked, you know, I just haphazardly throw them in the soda kiln to say, well, let's see what happens. So this is something that I love about clay. It teaches you to be extremely patient, and I think throughout my life this is something that I keep needing to revisit. And there's nothing like the centrifugal force of a wheel and a slight distraction to knock your finger into something, or to lose a sponge and try to catch it, or to take off too much clay, or watch the whole thing flop because you weren't paying attention and something's too thin. And after experiencing those failures over and over and over again, you know, you learn to slow down and really be there with your work. And in doing that, you're with yourself. And so here is a picture of our soda kiln. And it's a little more complex as far as using it, just because you have to build, rebuild, dismantle the shelves that are inside while you're loading it. And it's a very small space that you cram yourself into, and in the summertime, not so great because it gets hot. In the wintertime, it's kind of cozy. So you can see all of the teeny tiny little blocks in between all of these shelves. It looks really precarious, and you're very nervous that, you know, something could knock over by the time you're done with it. But with helping hands, it's, you know, a team effort. And again, that community to load and fire this kiln. And then you have the process of bricking up your walls to enclose all those clay babies inside and hope you see them when they're finished. And I guess this is where I got stuck on the wheel for a while, because the idea of making things that were useful to other people was so pivotal for me. Because as I've mentioned, like the idea of community and the idea of participating in each other's lives is something that I've wanted in my life, that I craved for it when I went on those long walks looking to run into some stranger that I lived in a space with. I wanted a way to connect with people that I hadn't even met with. And so making utilitarian work or functional pieces that could be an experience that you have every day that I can help make beautiful was something that drove me to continue in this method of making. My content then took quite a turn, and it got to this place of social development and physical development, and how we as a culture got to be here where we are. And I wanted, through pottery, and eventually you'll see some of my sculpture, to make those the dinner conversations. So you're using beautiful pieces of work that inspire you to talk about the things that matter to you with the people who matter to you. And along with exploring and experimenting, you have so many failures along the way. And the idea of knowing failure to appreciate success is really, really real. And I think this coincides with my content, because there are so many topics of conversation that become really gritty for us and we shy away from and want to sweep under the rug. But failure is just another way of learning. It's not a loss, it's a success, just not in the way that you thought it would be. And so now I'm currently revisiting my hand building skills through figurative sculpture, talking through this content that for me wasn't, you know, talked about enough. The physical development of the female body and what that, how you can expect to experience it and move through it without feeling shame or awkward. Became like this purest form of connecting to people in an ungritty way. And I want my work to serve as a reminder of how we communicate with ourselves and each other. And I want to normalize that discomfort that we've taught ourselves and rewrite the habit of silence and expand our understanding of communication and not turn away from those taboo subjects. So thank you guys for listening, and I hope you have a good rest of your night.
See how great they are? They're just awesome. So we hope you will join us up at the gallery now, and we have refreshments. And of course, you can look at all their beautiful art and ask questions and, enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much for coming.